Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare.
I couldn't help it. I had a cup full of hot tea that I had brought back from the office. When I passed by the taxi driver's window on the right side, I noticed it was open. I tossed my tea in. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. What's the worst thing you've ever done but don't regret? I'll start.
Number 1.
I had an issue with one of our local pizza places sticking flyers in my door. They handled their own advertising by printing up advertisements and coupons on colored letter-sized paper and sticking them in everyone's door around the neighborhood. They did this weekly and I finally asked them to stop since all it did for me was create a need for me to clean up or pick up their flyers. I called and asked them to stop putting a flyer in my door. They agreed to stop and next week there was the flyer again. I called again. They agreed again. The flyer showed up again. Lather, rinse, repeat. I started saving the flyers and was getting a good-sized stack of them. One day I was home from work early and saw the guy that distributed their flyers. I figured it would have been some kid or teenager. Here it was some greasy guy in his late 30s who drove down the street, got out, walked to 6 or so houses and stuffed flyers in their doors, got back in his car, rolled down the street another 90 feet and did it again. I walked down the street to ask him not to leave me any more flyers. I was polite at first and called after him, but it was clear he was doing his best to ignore me. I finally just walked over to his car and waited for him. He came over and started to get back into his car and I asked him if he could please skip my house in the future. He told me, "Fuck off." Got in his car and rolled away. I went back to my house, sat down at the computer, and drafted up a flyer that looked very much like the one I had received except, instead of $3 off a medium, $4 off a large, etc. it offered half-priced pizza, no limit. The next week after a greasy rude guy came by, I looked at the flyer for this week's color, blue, printed up a bunch of my special discount flyers in blue, walked up the street, and started swapping out his flyers for mine. That was the last time the flyers were distributed. They switched to advertising in the local circular delivered monthly by mail.
Number 2.
Commenter. I told someone to keep using Internet Explorer because that was the best browser. I didn't like them very much. Person B. I wouldn't even say that to my worst enemy. You must have really hated this person.
Number 3.
Back when dial-up was the internet to have, I spent a ton of time preventing my family from using the phone. My mother would get frustrated with it and knock me off by lifting up a phone until the noise disconnected me. Eventually, she got so frustrated that she took the modem out of my room and refused to give it back. I saved up money from selling candy to my classmates and bought an internal dial-up modem, learned how to install it. When she heard the noise again on the phone, she was furious. When she stormed into my room to take the modem away again, she realized it wasn't there, and that she still had it. I laughed at her, and told her that it wasn't a modem sound, but a bad phone. She replaced the phones about 8 times in the house before she finally gave up, and she blamed a new nearby cell phone tower for the problem. She eventually figured it out, though. The reason I don't regret this is the reason I did it to begin with. I had met a girl online who I had already known for a good 4 years prior to that episode with my mother. After I graduated from high school, we got a place together in her home state 900 some odd miles away. We've been married 5 years as of August 26th, have a kid, and have known each other nearly half our lives thanks to those 14 kilobits per second.
Number 4.
Ex-girlfriend had a friend and classmate in university who was a terrible person. She refused to stop mooching off her parents, so they forced her to go to school to become a teacher, paid for everything, then drove her 16 hours away from home and forcefully dropped her off. She had a slightly older long-term boyfriend who was probably the nicest guy I've met. He started a business shortly after university and was doing very well for himself but worked extremely long hours and rarely took days off. While away at university, his girlfriend proceeded to cheat on him rampantly. She even joked about how he'd never find out with me around. All the while he would send her flowers and gifts to cheer her up because he thought she was depressed due to her not communicating with him since midway through second semester. I don't hear from either of them for a few weeks and then later find out that he proposed to her. I expected her to stop cheating and hopefully learn her lesson, but this isn't the case. My ex tells me stories about how she would bring guys back to their dorm where they shared a bedroom and proceed to hook up with them just meters away from her. Having too great a moral conscience, I sent an email to the guy informing him of her infidelity, how long it has been going on, the proof I have, and my number in case he needs to talk about it. He replied with F, then about a week later with thanks. He took back the ring and they broke up. What I heard later was that after they were engaged, her parents pulled the funds on her education and she had convinced him to fund the rest of it. She basically wanted him to pay for her to travel 16 hours away to F other guys on his dime. TL, doctor prevented an extremely nice guy from being taken advantage of by a habitual cheating fiancé.
Number 5.
This is by far the rudest direct thing I have ever done in my life, but I sure as hell don't regret it. I was walking the short distance home from work, and I found myself in the middle of this really dramatic, pitiable scene. Something like out of a horribly depressing movie. There was an ambulance in the road, and a middle-aged woman was absolutely distraught and weeping over a small girl who was lying motionless on a stretcher. She was being wheeled into the ambulance by the paramedics, and the mother was moving along with them. One paramedic was communicating over walkie and the other was checking the girl. It was absolutely heartbreaking. This entire scene could be observed from behind the ambulance. As I approach the area, a taxi pulls up and idles for a bit. The mother is almost tearing her hair out of her head, and tears continue streaming down her face. Then the taxi driver does something to make me lose my faith in humanity temporarily. He starts laying out on the horn. It was ridiculous. The mother's almost completely prostrated at this point, this tiny little girl is on the edge of death here, and this asshole starts honking on the horn like it's nobody's business. And not just a couple beeps, he goes at it 10, 20 times. He just doesn't stop. The mother has a slight recognition, and you can just see in her face, why? Why is this happening? And she turns back to who I assume is her daughter. I couldn't help it. I had a cup full of hot tea that I had brought back from the office. When I passed by the taxi driver's window on the right side, I noticed it was open. I tossed my tea in. I never looked back. All I heard was a what the F. And that was good enough for me.
Number 6.
Another one I just remembered. I was sick one day in middle school but came in for the last 2 classes. I had a paper due that day in my first class, which I missed, but I didn't think of turning it in even though I did do it. In class the next day I was turning in my paper. It was a huge paper on a book that took me forever to write, when this super bitch told the teacher she saw me in school yesterday, implying I skipped class so I didn't have to turn in the paper. I explained my story but the teacher hated me and seemed to think I should have turned it in yesterday anyway. She asked the girl what should happen and the girl said that I shouldn't be allowed to turn it in at all, so the teacher gave me an F. This super F me for the rest of the quarter since it was 1/4 of our grade. Being the most insanely passive-aggressive kid at the time then, I put up no fight but I did devise a plan. I looked in the girl's planner to get her locker combination. We were required to write it on the first page, pretty secure, and also figured out her schedule. I would repeatedly go into her locker between classes and steal homework out of her homework folder. Never all of it, just a page or two, and I would even erase answers. Her grades started dropping and one day I finally stole one huge assignment, on par with the one she made me miss and in the same class, and when she realized she had forgotten it she got super upset and asked the teacher for another day. I quickly raised my hand and told the teacher that I didn't think that was fair since I wasn't allowed another day. The teacher begrudgingly agreed and the girl burst out crying. The teacher lectured her for crying. I know this probably sounds awful, but I don't regret it. It was so satisfying and this girl was such a smug bitch. TL, Doctor, I was really into James Bond in middle school.
Number 7.
When my, at the time 6-year-old son, who suffers from cerebral palsy, had an epileptic fit on Christmas Eve while I was out getting some stuff, his mother called me, distraught, from the ambulance screaming, "He's not breathing, he's not breathing." They had pulled the ambulance over to revive him. I dropped the shit I was carrying and ran into the road, got a cab and said gun it to the hospital now. On the way the driver asked what was wrong. I said my son's in trouble, being revived, get there fast, he has cerebral palsy, etc., babbling, shaking, him shaking as I write this. He then said to me he probably deserves it. I kinda did not register for a second, then I said sorry, wait, what? He said I believe he deserves it, he must have something bad, it's just God punishing him. I sat there and kinda said when we arrived a couple of minutes later we got there, I just started to step out, he grabbed me and said money. I said yes, I'm getting it. He held my arm so I couldn't get to my pockets. I kicked that cunt in the face, ran into the emergency room, found my son alive, barely, his mother a heap on the floor, a mess. I fell apart too. A couple of police officers came into the room just after me, tried to arrest me, the taxi guy was there pointing at me. I explained, the taxi confirmed, the police looked at me and said look after your boy, took the taxi guy away. My son got better, he's doing well now. I would like to find the taxi driver again one day to kick his face once again.
Number 8.
When I was about 12, my family emigrated from the USSR to the USA. The Soviet customs were notorious assholes who wouldn't let you take anything out of the country because everything except the clothes on your back was deemed as either national treasure or a matter of national security. Anyway, I had an old coin collection that I wanted to take with me. My mom made me show it to the customs officials because she was afraid that if we didn't disclose that and they found out, our exit visa would be revoked, a reasonable fear in that ass-backward country. So I showed it, and as the Soviet customs guy was giving it a stink-eye inspection, my mom, trying to play on his sympathy, said the kid spent a lot of time cleaning those coins, to which he replied, "Yes, I can tell. But he can't take them," and I was told to leave them with my aunt who was staying behind. After I did that, we were let past the security. I waited for about 5 minutes and approached another customs official and asked if I could go back past the security to say goodbye to my aunt. He let me do it, so I approached my aunt and asked for my coins back when he wasn't looking. Then I went back past the security with the coins in my pocket. I still have my old coin collection, and not a single F was given that day.
Number 9.
Commenter. My ex borrowed my toilet plunger one day, and she gave it back to me with a plastic grocery bag wrapped around the plunger part. A few days later she dumped me. When she came over the next day to get her clothes she had left at my house, I gave them back to her in the plunger bag. Person B. My ex-boyfriend cheated on me while on vacation in another country, then left me to go back to the same country for 6 months for the same girl, but not before lying about it and sleeping with me a few more times. He left his PS3 and all of his games with me. I spent a whole day saving over every single one of his games and effing up his stats. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.